You wake up every morning and something feels wrong. Not broken exactly, just empty. You scroll through your phone, you go through your routines, you smile when you're supposed to smile. But underneath it all, there's this hollow ache that never quite goes away. The doctors might call it depression. The internet might call it burnout. But what if I told you that what you're actually experiencing is something far more fundamental? You are not sick. You are profoundly disconnected. Disconnected from your body, from your emotions, from other people, from any sense of meaning or purpose. And here's what's terrifying: this disconnection has become so normalized that most people don't even recognize it anymore. Numb to your own life. Today, we're going to explore 10 forms of disconnection that masquerade as depression. Not because I want to dismiss your pain, but because I want to show you what's actually causing it. And more importantly, how to find your way back. Body betrayal. When was the last time you actually felt your body? Not thought about it, not looked at it in the mirror, but genuinely inhabited it, felt the blood moving through your veins, noticed the rhythm of your breathing without trying to control it. For most of us, the answer is, we can't remember. We've become floating heads, living entirely in our thoughts while our bodies have become little more than vehicles to carry our brains from meeting to meeting. The body keeps the score. This isn't just a poetic phrase, it's a neurobiological fact. Your body stores every trauma, every suppressed emotion, every moment of fear you never fully processed. And when you disconnect from your body, you disconnect from this crucial information. You stop feeling hungry until you're starving. You stop feeling tired until you collapse. You stop feeling sad until you're drowning in inexplicable despair. This isn't depression, dissociation. The body is trying to tell you something, but you've forgotten how to listen. And that silence has a cost that compounds daily. Emotional exile. How many times have you told yourself to stop being so sensitive, to toughen up, to not let things bother you? Every time you push down an inconvenient emotion, you built another brick in the wall between you and your own inner life. We were taught that certain feelings were unacceptable. Anger made you difficult. Sadness made you weak. Fear made you a coward. Joy made you naive. So you learned to perform emotions instead of feeling them. You learned to smile at the right moments and stay composed when everything inside was screaming. Carl Jung observed this pattern over a century ago. He called it the development of the persona, the mask we wear to be acceptable to others. But here's what Jung understood that most people miss. The emotions you exile don't disappear. They go underground. They become the shadow material that sabotages your relationships, your health, your sense of aliveness. What you call depression might actually be the accumulated weight of every emotion you never allowed yourself to feel. If this is resonating with something deep inside you, hit like and subscribe to keep exploring the depths of your psyche with me. Because we're only getting started. Digital poison. You have more ways to connect than any generation in human history. You can video call someone on another continent. You can share your thoughts with thousands of followers. You can swipe through faces looking for love at 3 in the morning. And yet, you have never felt more alone. The connection is an illusion. Social media promised us community and delivered comparison. Dating apps promised us love and delivered commodification. Group chats promised us belonging and delivered endless surface-level noise. Research from psychologist Jean Twenge shows that since 2012, coincidentally when smartphone ownership became ubiquitous, rates of depression among young people have increased by over 50%. We are lonely but afraid of intimacy. Digital connection activates just enough of your social brain to keep you scrolling, but never enough to actually satisfy your need for genuine human contact. You're eating social junk food and wondering why you're still starving. The blue light isn't just disrupting your sleep, it's disrupting your ability to be present with real humans in real time. But this leads us to something even more disturbing: meaning void. What are you actually living for? Not what you think you should be living for, not what your parents expected or society prescribed, but what genuinely makes your heart beat faster with purpose. Most people cannot answer this question, and that vacuum, that absence of meaning, creates a specific kind of suffering that no antidepressant can touch. Viktor Frankl, The psychiatrist who survived the Nazi concentration camps observed something profound. He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. The prisoners who survived weren't necessarily the physically strongest. They were the ones who still had a reason to live, a task to complete, a person to see again, a meaning to fulfill. Without purpose, even comfort becomes unbearable. You can have everything society tells you to want: the career, the relationship, the house, the financial security, and still feel this gnawing emptiness, because possessions cannot fill a purpose-shaped hole. What you're calling depression might actually be your soul protesting against a life that doesn't mean anything to you. Your psyche is not broken. It's signaling that something essential is missing. And speaking of what's missing, nature deficit. For 200,000 years, humans lived embedded in nature. We woke with the sun. We felt seasons change in our bones. We knew the plants, the animals, the rhythms of the natural world. And then, in the span of just a few generations, we sealed ourselves in boxes. Concrete boxes, glass boxes, boxes with artificial light and recycled air and no visible connection to anything alive. Trapped in concrete prisons, we think this is normal. It is not normal. Your nervous system evolved in forests and grasslands, near rivers and under open skies. It never adapted to fluorescent lighting and climate-controlled environments. Research shows that just 20 minutes in nature significantly reduces cortisol levels. Hospital patients with views of trees recover faster than those with views of walls. In every walk with nature, one receives far more than he seeks, but it goes deeper than stress reduction. When you're disconnected from nature, you're disconnected from the larger web of life that gives existence its context. You become an isolated node rather than part of an interconnected whole. The artificial world is making you sick, and you've been indoors so long, you've forgotten what you're missing. But this leads us to an even more painful disconnection: tribal exile. Humans are not meant to be alone. This isn't weakness, it's biology. For hundreds of thousands of years, exile from the tribe meant death. Being cast out was the ultimate punishment because a human alone in the wilderness would not survive. Your brain still carries this programming. Belonging. When you lack deep community, your nervous system interprets it as a threat to your survival, and it responds accordingly, with anxiety, with depression, with a persistent sense that something is wrong. The problem is that modern life has shattered traditional community structures. Extended families scattered across continents, neighborhoods where no one knows each other's names, workplaces of transactional relationships rather than genuine bonds. We traded villages for cubicles and wonder why we feel lost. You might have thousands of social media connections and still lack a single person you could call at 3 a.m. in crisis. What you're calling depression might be loneliness so chronic you've stopped recognizing it. Your psyche isn't malfunctioning. It's correctly registering that you are, in the deepest biological sense, dangerously isolated. And that isolation affects another crucial domain of connection: creative death. When did you stop creating? You remember. There was a time, probably in childhood, when you drew without worrying if it was good, when you sang without caring who was listening, when you made up stories and built worlds and expressed yourself without self-consciousness. And then at some point, you stopped. Someone told you that you weren't good enough, or you told yourself, or you just got too busy being productive to make time for anything that couldn't be monetized. You killed your artist. The psychologist Carl Rogers observed that creativity isn't a luxury. It's a fundamental human need. When this need goes unmet, we experience what he called incongruence, a painful gap between who we are and who we're living as. The creative process is a process of surrender, not control. What you're calling depression might actually be your creative spirit suffocating. Every human being has something that wants to be expressed through them. When you deny this expression, when you consume endlessly but never create, something essential in you begins to wither. You become a passive receiver rather than an active participant in life. And this passivity affects how you experience time itself. Present absence. Here's a question that might disturb you. When was the last time you were actually present? Not physically present while mentally elsewhere. not half listening while scrolling, not waiting for one moment to end so the next could begin, but genuinely, fully here. Most people spend their entire lives in mental time travel. We're either ruminating about the past, replaying old conversations, nursing old wounds, reliving old failures, or we're anxious about the future, planning, worrying, catastrophizing about things that haven't happened. Meanwhile, the only moment that actually exists right now slips by unnoticed. You're missing your own life as it happens. The research on this is staggering. A Harvard study found that the average person spends 47% of their waking hours thinking about something other than what they are doing. And this mental wandering is directly correlated with unhappiness. Do not dwell in the past. Do not dream of the future. Concentrate the mind on the present moment. What you're calling depression might be the accumulated grief of a life unlived, not because nothing happens, but because you're never fully there when it does. You're haunted by ghosts of past and future while the present begs for your attention. But there's another disconnection that runs even deeper. Authentic death. Who are you when no one is watching? Not the version you present on social media. Not the version that performs for your family or your coworkers, but the raw, unedited, uncurated you. If you can't answer this question immediately, if you hesitate, if you realize you've lost track, then you've discovered perhaps the most painful disconnection of all: self-betrayal. The psychologist Donald Winnicott distinguished between the true self and the false self. The false self develops when our authentic expression meets with disapproval, so we learn to present a more acceptable version. At first, it's a protective adaptation, but over time, the mask can become so thick that we forget there's a face underneath. Living someone else's life. You chose a career to make your parents proud. You suppress opinions to avoid conflict. You laugh at jokes that aren't funny. You perform versions of yourself for different audiences until you can't remember which one is real. What you're calling depression might be the exhaustion of constant performance, the mourning of a self you abandoned to be acceptable. Your true self hasn't died, but it's been locked away so long, it no longer trusts that it's safe to emerge. And this brings us to our final and perhaps most important form of disconnection: sacred absence. This isn't about religion, though it can be. This is about connection to something larger than your individual existence. Call it God, call it the universe, call it the web of life, call it the mystery. Whatever language resonates with you. For most of human history, people lived embedded in systems of meaning that connected them to the transcendent. Rituals marked transitions. Ceremonies acknowledged the sacred. Daily practices reminded people that they were part of something beyond themselves. The soul always knows what to do to heal itself. The challenge is to silence the mind. Modern secular life has stripped away these connections without replacing them. We've gained freedom from dogma, but lost connection to the numinous. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. The existentialist philosophers understood this. Nietzsche declared God dead and immediately warned that we hadn't begun to comprehend the consequences. Without connection to something transcendent, existence becomes a meaningless accident, and the self becomes an isolated speck in an indifferent universe. What you're calling depression might actually be a spiritual crisis, a soul crying out for connection to the sacred dimension of existence that modern life has forgotten how to access. So here's what I want you to understand. Labeling your suffering as depression and reaching for a pill might address the symptoms, but it won't heal the disconnections we've explored. Your pain has meaning. It's not a malfunction, it's a signal. A signal that you've become disconnected from your body, from your emotions, from real human community, from nature, from creative expression, from the present moment, from your authentic self, from purpose, and from the sacred. The path forward isn't about adding more medication, more distraction, more numbing. The wound is the place where the light enters you. It's about removing the barriers that prevent genuine connection. It's about slowly, courageously reconnecting with each dimension of existence you've abandoned. This isn't easy work. It requires facing uncomfortable truths. It requires grieving what's been lost. It requires the vulnerability of reaching out when you've grown accustomed to isolation. But here's the hope. These connections can be rebuilt. Your capacity for connection was never destroyed, only forgotten. Start small. Put your bare feet on the earth. Feel an emotion without trying to fix it. Make something without caring if it's good. Tell one person one true thing about yourself. If you made it this far, comment reconnected if you're ready to begin the journey back to yourself. Welcome to the Psyche Project. If this gave you something to think about, subscribe for more. Understanding yourself is the work of a lifetime.